Hey everyone, welcome back to Rich Souls. This is Saara, your host, of course, and I've got another episode for you, another solo episode for you specifically. I have been in a season of needing to record solos as a part of the creative process with this podcast, but I am going to have guests on, maybe not starting next week, but the week after. And so, yeah, I have a lot of conversations coming up that I'm really looking forward to and that I'm excited to just share with you all. So that's what you can expect in the pipeline for June. But what you can expect for today's episode is another vulnerable share from me. So today's topic is what I have learned in the process of pursuing my mission. And so I want to start with my background and some context for you as I get into these things that I've learned so far in the process of pursuing my mission. And that is that, let's see, as a child, I always had a strong feeling that I wanted to make something of my own. And I have had experiences as I grew up and into, I would say, college and even into actually just adulthood, just these experiences that reminded me of certain things about myself that gave me so much energy, or that endlessly fascinated me, like talking, like connecting with other people, like being able to connect other people to one another, like working on myself and learning deep and comprehensive nuances about how at least my life seemed to work and how, and also beyond my life, like how the nature, how everything seems to work. And also facing fears is like an intrinsic part of, like, I think who I am, like recognizing it, naming it, going after it, going towards it to a point, to a fault. So that gives you an idea of these kinds of breadcrumbs just within my own being and experience as I would just go through my life that I would get insight on. And that after enough years of life, I can look back on and recognize, like, oh, these are specific times and events and characteristics that I've experienced that have made me feel very expanded in like my body, in my energy, that has just been really inspiring to me, that continues to call to me no matter what my life looks like, that I just cannot mentally, physically, emotionally, energetically like put down, because it just keeps circling my existence. Like I just can't stop, yeah, pursuing these parts of me. And all that said, I was in a corporate career for about 8 years. I was technically in corporate for like 9 years. And I left about a year and a half ago. And when I left, I did not know what I wanted to do next. I just knew that I needed to change up my environment. And so I did what I had to do. I took the best next step and ended up in a year of the void, which was pretty much all of 2025 for me felt just that. And in that, I had so much time and space to experiment with things that I wanted to do. And for me, that took the form of different creative projects. And that was both directly tied to business and then also just more of like for the sake of creative expression. Just to name a couple of those things, it's like started a fractional chief of staff business, or attempted to. My first successful venture was giving human design sessions to people. Then I got into men's coaching for a while. And now I'm just freelancing for a medley of things. And I'm also making this podcast, and I'm feeling really good about both of those things. So that kind of brings you up to speed to where things are at today. And now I want to go into what I've learned in, this process of pursuing my mission, which I think truly did begin when I chose to leave my corporate job. So, like I said, so much of last year was about just dabbling in so many different types of well, maybe not so many, but like several types of businesses and several creative mediums. And it really was a year of just doing that, experimenting and wanting to see a outcome, like a more of the outcome that I'd envisioned for myself right then and there. But now when I look back on it, I realize how essential it was for me to really just open myself up to what was coming through to me to experiment with at any given time, and to recognize as I ran these experiments for myself, how I was responding to it. What was I enjoying it? What elements was I enjoying? Was it something I wanted to continue with? If I didn't want to continue with it, what were the reasons? What was the reason? Like, how was the resistance coming up? Was it something that I needed to actually push through? Or was it something that, like, I think was a sign that it's just not a fit for me, right? So just kind of going through that process. And I think in my experience, obviously it's my own podcast, I need to stop giving that disclaimer, but that in my experience, I like needed to experience these things, experience these different mediums and businesses in order to discern, like, exactly what I wanted and what I didn't want out of what I was building. And so I think that's the first thing that I want to say. Actually, a couple things in there. First thing is that if you don't already know what your mission is, if you don't already have a very strong vision of what you want to make, but maybe you know like how it feels, but not necessarily like what it's going to look like, then it can be helpful. And I think just a natural part of the process, but it could be helpful to just accept this, that if you don't have something tangible that you want to do, you're going to have to do any of the tangible things, or like the ideas that you're having. You're going to have to give them a chance and bring them to life in order to see whether they really should be alive, or like that you should continue to pour yourself into them. And that is just like, I don't know, I found it so disappointing at the time because I just wanted to find my thing, right? Like, you can imagine, maybe you've already experienced this yourself, but if you have this vision for what you want and you don't necessarily know what it looks like, but you have a deep feeling, like a true feeling that has been with you for like your whole life, and you're not finding the thing that gives you that feeling, and you don't know like how to give yourself that feeling that you know you're capable of and that you like deeply want more than like most things in this world and in this life, it's just disappointing. Yeah, I think it's kind of related to why those of us who pour into a business or create content can start doing the very thing, and face our resistance that might come up to doing it, like a fear of being seen and all of that stuff, or sharing our ideas, or investing money into something. Like, we can face those bits of resistance and actually like cross over that hump and get to creating a thing. And when that thing does not return its investment back to us on our time or in the way that we imagine or expect it to, we find it like disappointing, or like maybe this isn't the thing because it's not actually generating what I imagined that it would, what I imagined it would when I actually set out to make the thing. And yeah, I think that it's kind of like how everybody says, it's like when you find the thing that you want to be doing, that you would do regardless of whether you're getting paid for it or not. I guess I'm starting to feel that with this podcast. And it is distinct from the feeling I had when I was making TikToks every day for like a month, or I think I did 3 for a month. Then I've gone back and forth with TikTok. It was very different from that feeling because I truly did not like making TikToks. Like, if I was in the mood and I wanted to gab, like, yeah, it was fun to make one, to make 10 even. But if I really didn't want to show up and do it, it was difficult for me and it hurt my head and whatever. There were different signs to me that it just wasn't compatible with me, and what I wanted to make, because I just found it so fatiguing in so many ways. Versus with the podcast, when I don't want to record, like whenever I have to record a solo so far, I don't always want to record them. I often don't want to record them because I don't like scripting and I just need to sit down and like start gabbing and then something comes up. But to sit and wait for something to come up without knowing what it is very vulnerable, because I feel, I don't know what I'm going to talk about and I don't know how I'm going to say it. And it's just scary. Like, and so that creates a form of resistance and keeps me from wanting to actually sit down and record the solos. But when I'm actually in the solo and I'm recording, I do feel energized. I feel inspired. I feel connected to the people that are listening, to you guys. And I am also feeling connected to my mission, even if I don't even know if this podcast is that. I don't know if this is just like one, part of it. But I do feel connected to that feeling that I was describing before, and I think that's a good sign. And I think when something like for me with TikTok doesn't give me that feeling, and it also drains our energy. And yeah, I think that's just a sign that maybe it truly isn't the thing, So I think that is worth noting is the experimentation, like I mentioned at the very start of the episode, but also the discernment and the loose grip, as one of my coaches, Claire Olilla, puts it, on what we think our mission has to look like. If you want to hear more about that, I highly recommend the Rich Souls episode with Claire Olilla, where we talk all about her story and getting closer and closer and closer to her mission, which is now manifested as this beautiful co-creation called The Opening, with her co-founder, Tay Lauren, and her co-founder and best friend, Tay Lauren. And it's a breathwork community. I'm a part of it. I've talked about it like many times here, but it's such a beautiful creation. And it took, I think, like 7 or 8 years to get to the point that it is now, and has only been around for like the past 3 years, I believe. And prior to that, Claire started as like doing tarot and energy readings. And then she just had so many iterations of her business. And it's over such a considerable amount of time that like she's gotten to this point with The Opening. And I think it's just such a beautiful example of the dedication and commitment to the calling, like what it can look like, and that it might not just be, the whole thing of like the overnight success. Like it might not be that. It maybe for some people it is an overnight success, right? Like we hear those stories all the time. And we also know that the overnight success concept is also vastly overestimated, because a lot of people put in their reps for years and years and years, and in the face of so many failures and rejections, until something finally clicks. And there's, like J.K. Rowling, I don't remember the numbers here, but like her pitching Harry Potter to all sorts of publications and getting turned down like an crazy amount of times, until obviously finally got picked up, or she self-published or something. She did not self-publish, but until it became what it is today. And there are just so many amazing stories like that. As we all know, especially if we are building our own things, like there are so many days and times and mindsets and emotions that happen before that takeoff point. That's why I think that business is truly, genuinely like such a huge self-development and spiritual practice, is because so much does come up when you're building something. You really can sense into your limitations, like what is holding you back from creating this thing fully and giving it your all, and recognizing at certain points that your current level of all, or all that you're at a certain point able to give to it, is not actually enough for you to get closer and closer to that vision. Then it's just like a continuous process of like hitting limitations, surpassing them. Okay, now going beyond those limitations again, now going beyond those limitations again, and on, potentially without any return. So in that, when we hit the limitations, again, it's a matter of like, is this like using discernment to recognize, is this actually a limitation of myself that I can now see and work on in order to get closer to my vision? Or is this a limitation of my connection to the thing that I'm creating that means that there is a fundamental incompatibility, and that it means that I need to put this thing down? And that's what I think that last year of experimentation really gave me. And I'm probably still in that, but like that was just a very concentrated period of being able to see that pattern with each thing that I was working on. Piece of advice is actually advice that I received from my friend, David Sherry. He was on the podcast at some point when I first started interviewing guests. And he is a former founder, and now he's an executive coach. And there was a time at some point last year where I asked him, I told him my situation. I was like, I'm trying to do this and I don't know if it's what I should be doing anymore because I'm running out of money. Like I'm running out of money after leaving my corporate job. And that is so freaking scary. Like I'm losing a form of security. I'm not feeling resourced to continue doing what I'm doing. And I'm wondering if I'm making a horrible mistake by continuing to do it. And he told me, Saara, a lot of people who set out to start a business do not fail because they're not capable of starting the business, of having a successful business. It's because they couldn't stay in the game. They couldn't stay in the game for long enough, even. And that hit so hard. And obviously at that time, it was linked to finances for me. But now I've come to see how staying in the game, I think for a lot of people can be related to finances is, like needing to resource yourself, to be able to like pay for your life and your existence. And that enables you to continue doing, pursuing your mission. Of course, like math is just math. That's just a fact. And I think beyond like the financial perspective is like, what other resourcing do you need? So for example, if you're hitting limitations, like mental, emotional limitations, and you're having a hard time overcoming them on your own in pursuit of your mission, then it might make sense to invest in a coach or in some kind of certification or program. And I also have done that since. So I think it is also like resourcing of like, if you are like working yourself to the bone like consistently and you're not actually taking care of your physiological health, it's like, okay, you might need to like start to like incorporate some actual like wellness goals into your life and not just focus on the business goals, because that's your wellness is going to feed the business, So just kind of zooming out and looking at your situation and continuing to ask like, what do I need to continue to stay in this game? Okay. So now I want to talk about what happens when you actually get clear on the best next step to take. And you actually take that best next step. And that best next step involves an element of consistency. So to ground it, give you an example, is that for me, back in the early spring, I got a ton of clarity about what my best next step was, what I needed to do with every part of me moving forward until I got new guidance. And for me, that was working on this podcast and doing so consistently, because up until that point, I had just committed to 11 episodes, and like a certain amount of episodes. And then with my other projects, I would commit to at least a month of consistent creation, but I needed to commit to something that was uncomfortable and actually seemingly impossible for me, which for me is 52 episodes over the course of the year. So a weekly episode, and just staying committed to something for that long and just like letting the process happen. Like I was talking about, like pouring in and like seeing what wanted to be iterate next with this. So that said, right when I got that clarity, I also got opportunities that kind of probed my Achilles heel, or like was my kryptonite, and affected the way I was relating to this newfound clarity. And obviously I've been making the podcasts very consistently for I think a month or two now, which is a lot because again, I haven't done that before, but and I'm planning on continuing again for the year, but it was still something that was taking away from my capacity to sense into what did need to be iterated upon within this podcast on an ongoing basis, with like each episode, which with each week of like sharing on socials, like I have just found myself to be distracted in having that really fine awareness of what was being asked of me to improve upon in order to show up here even more me, and to get this to where I want it to go, which is to grow and to get better at it and to improve the production of it. And, all of these things that make something of quality and of something beyond it just being of quality. I mean, although it's inherently linked to this, is that gives value to other people, not just me. temptations, distractions coming up as soon as you get clarity. I also had this last year when I first decided to even start my own business. And yeah, so I want to name that because I feel like we hear this. We hear this. We hear this. People talk about this all the time. You figure out what you want and then you're going to get tested on it, right? But the thing is that when you're tested with your kryptonite, it is so much harder to walk away. And it's so much easier to justify why this kryptonite is worth incorporating into your life. And as a byproduct of doing that, it can not, maybe not always, but it can, at least it has for me so far, distract from the mission. So yeah, I really want to name that. And again, not just like that the testing happens, but also that it's going to be a thing that's particularly hard, or it may be a thing that's like particularly hard for you to like kind of turn your like turn a blind side to turn around to say no to otherwise just limit and put constraints on in your life so that you can keep the capacity to work on the mission. I encourage you that if you're hearing me talk about this and you are recognizing like your brain is telling you different things that might be applicable for you as to what that could be for you, to listen to it and to at least experiment with putting some guardrails in on it so that you can like again keep the capacity for pursuing your mission. Yeah, I will remember that for next time. I will remember that, and hopefully I'll learn the lesson because this has happened to me a couple of times. So okay, so the next thing that I've learned about building my mission so far is that it is not enough to know what the aligned action is or the best next step is to take. I talk about this a little bit in my last solo episode, but essentially it's immensely valuable, right? To know like what the best next step is. And sometimes that like is all we do know and all we even like need to know and want to know in order to create some kind of flow between us and what we're creating. And I think there's also a point of recognizing when you need to just double down on continuing to take that one best next step over and over and over again, which is to say to be consistent with something in order to give it the time and legs to actually develop into something in and of itself, right? To go to the example of last year again, I was working on TikTok, like I mentioned, I had like different kinds of businesses going. And then I was working on like Substack, I was podcasting. I was just kind of doing a lot of things to, again, feel into like what was the thing or what are the things that I should actually be pursuing, and should be as in like what feels good for me and sustainable and rewarding and like it simply just makes sense on every level. But the thing is that part of, this process of getting to the podcast and like the vision I have for it is recognizing that I needed to stop being inconsistent with it. Like I needed to commit to a regular cadence of the steps that are necessary to produce this and to take those steps consistently. And again, just iterate as I go and to face the resistance that was coming up that I described earlier. But sometimes we can take that resistance and think that it means that we just need to try other things like, oh, I should, whatever. For me, it was like, oh, I should also create the TikToks on top of the podcast, or I need to like come up with like a whole branding thing on top of this. And I need to like just coming up with all of these different ideas, like these side quests, instead of actually focusing on the thing that I know I need to be doing. And I feel like that knowing of what we need to be doing with regard to our mission is probably seemingly unclear, but also clear. We just might have some, again, resistance to it or just like a lack of confidence in it. But there could be, I think there is an element of clarity. And if you hone in on what that clarity is giving you, and again, you are getting ideas of iteration, that the iteration is like you need to make sure that it's actually feeding that like one point of clarity that is like, again, like I keep saying clarity and clear, but like that is abundantly clear to you, that it's not just something that is like going to distract from the main thing. That was a very long, windy and like fluffy way of explaining that. I hope that made sense, but essentially it is to just keep your eyes on your North Star and part of that is, again, this process of iteration. But if you are finding yourself getting like lost in like kind of diffusing your energy, attention, and effort into these different side quests that are detracted, that are like making it slower to actually be with your North Star to get to your North Star, then consider that you are actually just resisting your North Star, and that you are distracting yourself with things that may be novel or satisfying in making you feel productive, or like that's just how it shows up for me. But just be wary of that. Distractions don't always just come from outside of the vision or mission. It can also come from within the vision and mission, and like it can be things that are essential to getting to you to where you want to go, where your mission it wants to go. But that if you like put a disproportionate amount of, again, resources onto those things, they can actually end up taking away from it. And I don't know, I wonder if it's just a balance, but just have that awareness. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about is that if you are like me and you are making something that feels so intrinsically linked to you, that it can be tempting to get into a cycle of doing the energetic and practical work to build a business. So like for me, I will very much like work on, the limiting beliefs that come up, and I'll see the different areas that I feel resistance like on an emotional level, and I'll push through that or work on that. And I also have been very good about being consistent about this thing that I'm building. And so like kind of showing up in both of these ways. But the thing that I'm realizing is that education is actually really, really important for building out a business. And at least for me, and so I want to share it here, is recognizing that I actually haven't done enough reading or learning about podcasting and about, just like even how to speak more clearly or be a better interviewer or organize like solo episodes or actually like grow a following. Like I've like, you hear things everywhere, honestly, on some of these things, but you don't actually like, it's very different from going deep into specific like strategies in marketing and learning about those and incorporating those into what I'm actually doing. So I just wanted to share that one because it's newer for me and it's already like feeling so valuable, is to, kind of zoom out of your process and also look to, yes, your peers, but also to, like what's been written about or like what courses there are on what you're trying to do, because it can be super helpful, because essentially you're learning what other people have done that has worked, and you're able to then, incorporate that into your own psyche and therefore your own efforts. And it gets to be like a kind of a part of like your, the field of information or like the breadth of information that you get to discern from for what is going to move the needle for your mission. Another thing that I've learned about my mission is that there is a time when in the ideation phase when experimenting is really important, like I have shared throughout this episode, but also when a lot of excavation it becomes moot. So if you've read about or heard about the Artist Way, or maybe you've heard about the morning pages, it is this practice of journaling freehand 3 pages every single morning. And the idea is to just like clear your being of, whatever. It like just clears yourself of like any kind of points of friction in your life through journaling, and kind of gives you, I would say more specifically, it is a tool to help clear friction from your being by forcing you to process what is going on in your life, and to then recognize changes that you might need to make in your life in order to support your creative spirit. And it's such a beautiful practice. I still love journaling so much. But I find that there's a point where like that excavation is just, it can go too far. In self-improvement work, in creating a business, like it can go too far. It's like, yes, do those things. And you need to add a little bit of, again, like the tactical things, the practical things, the like consistency, the steps, the something that you need to actually do the thing. You're not going to manifest it by just working on yourself and like getting energetically clear and like having a strong vision. Like you need to actually do the thing, and you need to do the thing before it returns any results, and you need to do the thing even when you don't want to. But specifically, obviously, if you know what the thing is. So just recognizing when you are going too far in the self-development work and not putting in enough reps in the actual work, that is just another the self-development work can then in that way become just a distraction. And Akash Kanoji and I talk about this in his episode from like maybe 3 episodes ago, if you want to go listen to that. But yeah, it's just this idea of like, we are part matter, we're part divine, and we get to be both. And that means that the way that we bring things into life ends up being involving a little bit of both. So I see the self-development and spiritual work as being of more of the divine, but then we do need to be in this world of matter and actually make the things with our hands. And maybe the thing I'm making with my hands is a podcast and I'm really just clicking around and talking, but that is me making the thing. And the podcast is it's not going to grow itself, and it's not going to grow from me feeling like I deserve it or having a strong vision for it. Like it's only going to grow from me continuing to clarify my intentions, clarify like how I show up to it, clarify my intentions with it, and like who I want to have on it, and like the conversations I want to have with them, and also like literally doing all of those things, reaching out to the guests, iterating on my pitch messages, scheduling the sessions, working with my editor, like rolling them out on social media, like doing the actual things. And I know that's obvious. I feel like that is so obvious, and it might be so obvious to some people, but I wish I heard that last year. Although I wasn't totally clear on the podcast then, but like I wish I knew that earlier. So that is everything for this episode. I hope that this is helpful. Of course, that's why I'm making it. But what I will say is I don't know if I captured everything, because again, I just come into these episodes and I kind of just like prattle off what's like coming to me. So I might think of more things. I very likely will. But this just gives you an idea of some of the core and still relevant lessons that have come up for me in my process. And I am so curious if they do resonate with you or if they don't resonate with you. I'd also love to hear that. So please share that in the comments. And also, if you want to add to this list, I would also love to hear that. So again, you can leave all of your feedback in the comments wherever you're listening to this. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to Rich Souls. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, I would love to hear what one key takeaway is that you got from it in the comments wherever you're listening to this. If you have any topics or guests that you'd like to see on, feel free to shoot them my way either in the comments, or you can reach out to me on Instagram. And lastly, it would mean so much to me if you were to take just a couple of seconds and rate this podcast. Thank you. See you in the next one.